Hi, everyone. Welcome to our session, Inclusive Communities in the Mexican Diaspora. I'm super excited to introduce two amazing, inspirational Mexican women. I've been following them for so many years. Their trajectory is amazing what they have achieved in the United Kingdom. So we have Elena Rodriguez-Falcon. She is the Chief Academic Officer at Study Group. And we have Katya Torres de la Rocha, Chief Executive Officer of Mexgrocer. But I'm going to let them introduce themselves. Tell us a little bit about you. Let's start with Elena and then we move on to Katya. Tell us a little bit about you. People know you already, of course, because you have this impressive career in the United Kingdom. But I guess people want to know what inspired you to initiate your journey in this country.
Rika, thank you very much for inviting us. I'm not only excited to be here to talk to the community, but also to share the screen with my great friend Katya. So I'm very, very happy. I could give you the long answer, but I'll give you the shorter one because otherwise the whole hour will go. I think if I look just back to my sort of time after I graduated from University in Monterrey, where I'm from, I did an engineering degree. My first job was in Cemex, huge company, as you know. And the boss that I had was quite direct in his feedback. And one of the things he said to me back then was that I would never achieve anything if I didn't learn to speak English. And I mean, to be honest, I took that as helpful feedback because I was studying English, but clearly I wasn't learning it. So coming to the UK was to some extent to try to address that piece of feedback, but also as an engineer, I went to Sheffield, where, of course, engineering is one of the famous things they do in the University of Sheffield particularly. So I think my inspiration came from feedback. My aspiration came from finding myself accidentally becoming an academic. That wasn't the plan. I was an engineer. I was going to go back and work in industry, but an accident led me to find my true vocation. And so I think that what happened afterwards is the long story. So I won't go into that just now because I'm sure you'll ask. But I think just to finalize the answer, my inspiration is also helping. And so coming here was to help myself, but also to be able to help others. The way that happened, that was very unexpected for me.
Thank you, Elena. So, yeah, interesting, the position of serving and helping. Okay, Katya, what about you? Tell us about you, your amazing trajectory in the United Kingdom. Before we spoke, you've been here, what, 30 years, I think you said, in the UK?
No, 21. And as
21.
As Elena, I'm very thankful to be here and also sharing with my good friend and also to get to know you, Monica. And yes, well, I've been in the UK for 21 years and a little bit like Elena, I came here accidentally because I wanted to have a sabbatical year and improve my English. And it's something I always been very good at since I was very little, is to spot where there is business opportunity, where there is money, where there is profit. I was already a businesswoman back in Mexico. I had an outsourcing company and a restaurant. And after a few months being in the UK, I realized that there wasn't a proper, authentic Mexican restaurant in London. So that's where the whole inspiration for the business started. So instead of a sabbatical year, I've been here for 21 years. So
wow,
was pretty much that. And one thing led to another. From the restaurants, I jumped into wholesale and selling Mexican food, as you know, to supermarkets, shops, food producers, restaurants. I mean, when I opened, it was the first authentic Mexican restaurant. And in the years after that, at the moment, we have 500 Mexican restaurants that we supply. So the industry is grown significantly. I think Mexican food awareness has grown enormously, mainly for things like 2006, the UNESCO naming Mexican food in Heritage of the World. After that, in 2014, 3 Mexican restaurants made the 50 best. From then, a lot of high-profile chefs like Jamie Oliver, Gordon Ramsay, Nigella Lawson. Everybody wants a little bit of Mexico, you know? So that also helps of the awareness, and also the change of misconception of the Tex-Mex, you know, the burritos, the chimichangas, the nachos, and chile con carne. Suddenly, people are starting to be aware of what is a typical and traditional street food like tacos, but also a lot of people are starting to understand a lot better what is to expect from Mexican food. So I've been at the right place at the right moment, but it's because, as I said, I always been quite good at saying, oh, there is money here. Like 2009, when I opened Mexgrocer, I said the future was e-commerce, and I started in e-commerce, quite strong digital marketing, and obviously through the pandemic that was proved to be the case. I think also purchase habits have changed in the UK. That helps also the website side of the business. So yeah, that's where the inspiration came from, to stay here. And obviously got married, divorced, married again, you know, children, all the rest of it. But mainly it was the opportunity to share with the UK Mexican food.
Thank you. It sounds to me like both of you are really trailblazers. Seriously, I am grateful to have some examples of what is possible for me, especially as a Mexican. I think a lot of foreign people will look up to you and want to know about your journey. It all sounds great, but surely, well, I can talk about my experience. I'm a migrant or an expat. It depends on the wording you want to use. And it's tough. Moving abroad can be really challenging because you leave behind your network, you leave behind your family, your longtime friends, and yet there is something so compelling about starting fresh and living in a different culture. Can you share a significant challenge that you encounter maybe in the early years or along the way? It could be recent as well. A challenge that you have faced to build a network and a community, personal or professional or both, and how did you overcome this challenge? It could be a language barrier. Katya mentioned before that it's actually an advantage. So she turned the disadvantage into an advantage. So maybe you can share that, Katya. So maybe we should start with you. How did you overcome the challenge?
Well, I think anybody that comes from another country, and unless you were born bilingual, I think it's a challenge always. It's always going to be, even afterwards, sometimes people say something as, oh, that's a word I've never heard before. And sometimes even, you know, communication can be challenged. And it's another issue, if you like to call it issue, of native English speakers, is that they forget the effort that you're making by speaking their language. Like when you go to France or Italy or Mexico, if somebody speaks our language, you're like, oh, you know, like you are very patient. When somebody from abroad come to the UK, people have very little tolerance, you know. It's like pretty much like, if you don't speak English, you must be idiot. So I think it's changing slightly, but it's still that kind of attitude. But last time we spoke, what I was saying is that I found my accent, and I found the fact that I'm a foreigner in many ways to be an advantage. I was mentioning this to you before about the boxes. Every society, every community have boxes. Where they put you in those boxes, depending on your accent, depending on if you went to public school, private school, if your parents are from a particular, if you are from Newcastle here, you're a Geordie, and people have a preconception of the kind of person that you are. if you live in certain postcode, you know, etc., etc. So every society, including the Mexican one, have this preconception about the person because of their accent and because where they come from. However, when you're a foreigner, people don't really know which box to put you on. So that gives you an advantage to be more direct and also to get away sometimes with things that perhaps the locals will not allow to somebody from the same country. And I'm saying in general, because the same thing will be in Mexico. Perhaps if an Italian girl arrives dressing in a very hipster way, people will not make assumptions about her heritage or where she comes from or social status or financial status, because it's a foreigner, you know, can get away with certain things. And also in business, very often allows me to be more direct, that if I was British, perhaps by saying, oh, you telling me that this is what you want 90 days credit, you want allows me to be more direct without being taken for rude. So I think it's one of those things that you have to find a way to make whatever circumstances come your way. Not sure what Elena thinks about that. Would like to hear what she thinks.
Well, actually, I'm agreeing. I'm nodding vigorously, Katya, because I was just thinking about challenges, and of course we all face challenges. And in my own sort of area of work in academia, I came from industry into academia. I am not a traditional academic, a research-intense academic. That's not what I did. What I did was to specialize in education, because that's what excites me, and that's where I thought I could make a difference. And because of that, just a bit like Katya, I started to spot some opportunities in my area of work, like let's teach students in an authentic manner, like, you know, it's common sense, but people thought it was innovative back then, give them a real project and so on and so forth. But what actually happens is that if you are in a research-intensive university, like in my case, being an educator was outside the norm, just like being a foreigner is outside the norm. And that can be an advantage or disadvantage. An advantage is that you can experiment, you can do things that traditional academics wouldn't do. But the disadvantage is that you are not in the system. And because you are not in the system, basically you get stuck in your progression. And academics will have a really, traditional academics, very, very clear progression criteria, whereas someone like me didn't. And I got stuck straight away because I just wasn't in the system. But just as Katya says, being Mexican, being direct, being different, friendly, and so on and so forth, gives you the opportunity to do, in my case anyway, two things. One was to be able to tell the story of what I was doing. I always say that I'm a product of storytelling, because when I was doing these exciting things with students, which to me, I will insist, they were common sense, but for everyone else, they were like really different. Suddenly, they became visible. So I became visible, and visible in a way that I didn't expect. So the TV wanted to film what the students were doing, and suddenly I was visible. And because I was Mexican with an accent, with a different personality, people wanted to listen to what I wanted to say, as well as were curious about it. So it was good for me, it was good for the students, it was good for the university. Indeed, it was good for the profession, because engineering is not very well seen in this country. Many girls don't join engineering. So I think that opened to me the opportunity to be able to have those difficult conversations with senior members of the university, to say educators are not celebrated and promoted in the same way as traditional academics. And so I became one of the first ever professors of the University of Sheffield because I was able to have those conversations. But that wouldn't have happened if I hadn't been able to communicate, to tell the story, to be visible. And someone once said to me, if you don't communicate it, it doesn't exist. And so you exist suddenly because you are actually telling the story. And that's why every time when I have a platform like this, I like to say to people, communicate it, tell it, because otherwise it doesn't exist. And Katya is exceptional in communicating as well. And that's very obvious. That's why people want to listen to her and want to buy her product, including myself.
For sure, there is a need, definitely. I think, so Elena, you mentioned storytelling. Is this something that comes naturally to you, or did you teach yourself how to, the strategies of effective communication? And did you have that awareness of almost selling yourself in your story, or did you cultivate this skill?
It's such a good question, and I was trying to I was scratching my head because I'm not sure, to be honest. I've been here 26 years, and my sort of the memories I have of telling the story at the beginning of my academic career begin with an accident. Again, I didn't mean to be on the newspapers. That was an accident. Was I a natural? I think it wasn't that difficult. I wasn't as scared as the majority of people. That's true.
Okay.
But I can tell you, I am a better storyteller now than I was 26 years ago. For various reasons, because I've been learning how to be better at it. I've been trying to refine the skills. I've been practicing a lot, time and again and again and again, and seeking opportunities to tell the story, but also kind of opening doors for others to tell their story. So it's a gorgeous thing that you can do. Tell your story, open the door for someone else to tell their story. And teaching is like that. You know something, but when you teach it, then it gets better. You get better at it, and so on. So I think I'm better at it now. I don't think I'm as a great communicator as Katya is, for example, but I have practiced time and again and again and again. So I would say that practice makes better, but I suppose Mexicans, we are less scared of saying things.
Well, Katya strikes me as a super confident woman, and I want to ask her, similar to the storytelling and the ability to communicate. Katya, is this something that came naturally from you? You said that you were already good at spotting opportunity business.
Yes.
Did you have that confidence naturally, or did you just push yourself or learn how to do it?
To be honest, I always say that my confidence in myself came from my cheerleader when I was 8 years old. I had a difficult upbringing. My father was a typical macho man, quite violent, and to be honest, not a very nice person. And my mom was a typical old-fashioned woman that had to ask permission even to go for a coffee with a friend, let alone to work or anything like that. But I have a grandmother that was very encouraging, and she always kind of like pushed me to do anything I wanted. So I start my little own business at the age of 8, and I end up developing that business quite a lot until I was 15. So I run that a market stall selling secondhand magazines until I was 15. So that when you talk to people, when you are so little, it gives you confidence, and you have to have confidence. So it's a little bit like a virtuous circle. If you come out, it gives you confidence, and because you're confident, you come out, you know. So I think also, like Elena was saying, Mexicans were quite good at talking to other people. We're more open, you know, that like, if you like, some Anglo-Saxons tends to be a bit more reserved in that respect. But again, the storytelling is something that it's important and it's transcendental when you're genuine. When you're trying to fake it, it doesn't work, you know? The reason why Elena is such a good storyteller is because she's genuine. She genuinely feels passion about the academia, is passion about education, is passion about, and this is another thing that comes from your own security. A lot of people, and especially I would say low achieving people, tends to feel like, if I share this piece of information, I'm gonna lose my little piece of power, and therefore somebody is gonna steal my job. And that's the typical example, you know, people that at work don't want to share information, don't want to teach others, don't want to. When you are confident in yourself that your job is secure, that you are very good at your job, when you are self-confident, it's a lot easier to pull the other one towards you, you know, and say, I open the door for you to tell your story, and I'll help you. And you know, and that's what teaching, mentoring, networking, helping others, and opening the door for others. But that has to come from being genuine. And also, it's like when I talk about food, it's not difficult to sell Mexican food because I love it. I mean, we are Mexicans. I am convinced that all Mexicans, if they look closely to our DNA, it must be tamales, and in the case of Elena, some takis, you know. So when people ask me, you know, when I go and see chefs or buyers from shops or food producers, and they ask me about flavor, for me it's so easy to describe the flavor of a chipotle, you know, the smoky, you know, or when I talk about mole, it reminds me when I was a child. So easy. It's really, I've got the easiest job in the planet because I just genuinely love what I do. And when I talk about the Mexican companies back then, you know, the efforts that they're making, the social work that in some cases are doing, I feel a huge amount of pride. And therefore the story comes genuine. So it's actually quite easy. But as Elena says, and I recently read a book that I highly recommend to anybody that is listening to this conversation, called The Outliers. It's such an amazing book, because one of the things is nothing happens just like that, you know. It's a combination of opportunity, but it's also a combination of 10,000 hours work, you know. Elena comes and says she's a great storyteller, that she's got this opportunity or whatever, but she has worked 10,000 hours at least for the first time to get to be able to get to that opportunity. And it's the same, you know. I've worked really hard to learn, to work, to prepare myself for the challenges, whether it's learning about SEO, you know, search engine optimization, where it is about learning about exports, imports, you know, the legislation, so it's, I think all of that is a combination. And she says she's been preparing for storyteller. That's the same thing, you know, you prepare yourself, but if you're genuine and self-confident, those storytellings comes natural, and therefore they convince.
You say something very interesting, Katya, because I personally think that we live in a culture globally in which there is a lot of entitlement. Like we think, because we see on social media and people are showing this and they're showing that, and often we just feel like we are entitled to our success. And you said something key there, that you still have to put the work in. And young people especially, they just give up so easily sometimes because they don't see the result immediately, because what they see on social media is just the result, but no one really talks about what happens, the back end of all of that, of all the skills you have to learn. So I'm going just to summarize to what you just said, because the next question was, what specific strategies you find useful to understand, cultivate, and expand your network, your relationships, your visibility. So far you've said storytelling, teaching, mentoring, putting yourself out there and putting the work, the hours, learning, growing. Is there anything else you can add to that? How you can expand, cultivate yourself, cultivate your network, your relationships, and your visibility?
Yeah, I mean, that's a great summary, by the way. And I was listening intently to Katya, and just to reaffirm that I absolutely agree. Hard work is not communicated. And just to say, when I was working with I was involved in a project called Women in Engineering many years ago, and many women don't put themselves forward for promotion or so on and so forth, and that's mainly because they are afraid in general, not just women, but many people are afraid of making a mistake or of not succeeding. And I used to share with them something that speaks to what Katya was saying. Back then, you used to keep files, real files, actual paper. Now you keep them in the computer. But I used to keep, and I still have it, a box of all the things that I applied for, whether there were grants, applications, awards, promotions, etc., to be on the board of this, to be on the board of that, etc. And I genuinely used to say that 75% of the things that I had in there, I didn't get. But with 25% of the things that I actually did get, I had managed to achieve what people could see. And that looked quite impressive. But the reality is that there was 3 times, 75% of the times that I actually got a no. And I think a strategy is to learn to appreciate that mistakes, failure, things not going well are actually an opportunity, not something to push you back. In my line of work, you have to innovate, but you can only do that if you are prepared to make mistakes, because otherwise, well, things will never be perfect. So make mistakes, learn from them. If it doesn't go well, so what? Try again. What's the worst that can happen is one of the strategies that I put in place. But Katya.
I totally agree with you. And I was thinking while you were talking about that, that I always said failing is just not an option. But yes, you're right. You fail in some strategies, then you try another way. Then you look for, and that is also, I think that source of mentality comes from being Mexican, to be honest. A lot of that. And I'll tell you why I think that. I am a daughter of the crisis. You know, when I was born, the President Lopez Portillo says he was going to defend the peso like a perro, you know, like a dog. And a few months later, you know, the peso went from, I think it went from 3 pesos a dollar to 12 pesos a dollar overnight, you know. So it's always been, Mexico has always been in crisis, whether politically, economically. I mean, I was born in 74. So by the time I was born, all the good era, that was the 50s and the 60s, that was gone. So because we were born in a country, you know, is emergent country. I said emergency countries, you know, everything is an emergency, everything, you know, we have problems with corruption, we have problems with political crisis, natural disasters. Oh my God, we are very good at that, aren't we? My husband always says, when here there is a little bit of storm, in Mexico is a hurricane. You know, we do disasters very, very well. And what happened is that source of crisis, I think in a way, makes you more resilient and also makes you more inventors. They said that necessity is the mother of invention. So I think that very often Mexicans tends to be more adaptable to those kind of crises and find another way. I also think, like Elena says, something doesn't go your way, you fail in something, and a strategy goes wrong, whatever. Yeah, you can be sad about it, but not for too long, you know? Cry a little bit, dry your eyes, and what's next? And I think personally for me, the best example was the pandemic, because as you can appreciate, having 500 restaurants as a client, plus hotels, bars, and the rest of it, and suddenly Boris Johnson saying, we're gonna close all hospitality. And I've got, you know, pretty much 100,000 kilos of food and drinks ready for the hospitality. I have £500,000 committed in debt, you know, from restaurants and hotels. And I did cry. I did have a few tears. And after the tears was like, okay, how do we adapt to these new circumstances? What do we do? And the key to me is, it's always when there is a crisis, there is also an opportunity at the same time. But how? Well, it's about to adapt to the new way things works, and you have to do it quickly. Because if you don't adapt quickly, and you cry and you cry and you cry and you give up and you just say, I can't do that, then that's it. But if you stop and actually think, like for us was suddenly, let's go into the retail. Let's reinvent the whole business model very, very quickly so we can adapt to the new circumstances. So yeah, I think that part is very important. The resilience and understanding that failures are not necessarily failures. Try and error is sometimes the way. I mean, you have to be a parent to know that that's how it goes. You try and error with them all the time. Most of the time is an error, but there you go. That's what therapists are there for. So yeah, I think that's a very important part of being, in my case, being in business, or for Elena, in her case, being in the academia.
Katya, how do you get over failure quickly? Because I do get what both of you are saying. You got to put yourself out there. You have to be willing to fail and take it on the chin. But I think,
yeah.
But how do you get over it quickly? Because I think this is the reason why a lot of people avoid trying things or getting out of the comfort zone, because failing feels horrible.
Yes, it does.
We personalize. How do you get over it?
I think for me is analyze and make a plan. And very often, I can give you 1,000 examples, but the thing is, when you are in business, 99% of the times is problems. You know, yesterday somebody drive wrongly the van, and it's going to cost £9,000 because they drove the van wrongly, and it's brand new, and killed the engine or whatever. And it's always, oh, we tried to deliver 10 pallets to Costco. It's in the wrong side of pallets, and it's going to cost us such and such. A container is being delayed because some problems in the Middle East. You know, it's constantly trouble. And I think if you cry every time something goes wrong, you never get anything done. So I think you develop with the years a tough skin. But to me, what it does, it helps me, is to stop very often, have a glass of wine at night, and just stop in my tracks, and then think. And very often, 3 o'clock, 4 o'clock in the morning, I wake up and I think, okay, I'm gonna write down, how can I A, resolve this, B, find another thing, or 3, C, move on from that and start something else.
Okay, I'm gonna share that. I like these 3 steps. Helena, what about you? What do you do to,
you know,
I quickly get over the failure?
I think that there is a fascinating difference in approach, and mainly because Katya is the leader of her organization, and I work, for example, in academia, where doing something can be done with other people as well. And so what I would say is that when I experience a setback or a challenge or something doesn't go right, I do stop as well, because I think that there are two things. One, you need to think, why? Why didn't it go right? And getting feedback and making sure you understand why it didn't go your way is important so that you can correct it. But the other thing is there are other people who can help. It doesn't have to be you yourself by always alone. And so what I also like to do is to get other people and say, okay, this didn't work. Why? Who can do what? Who can do what? Who can help? Who can open that door? You asked me a question, Monica, the other day about all of those people who I talked about in my International Women's Day video. And you were saying, well, all of these people were there to help you, and they were not there by chance. Believe me, they were there because I asked for help. Every time something did go wrong or something was a block, I tried to make sure that something opened that door for me or help me move that obstacle. So I think Kat is right. You have to stop. You have to think about it. You cannot dwell on things forever, because otherwise you won't move forward. But you can also ask for help, and there are many people who can help in different ways.
Right. So we go back to tapping into those relationships in your environment. I know, Katya, you manage people, and I guess you as well, Elena, as a chief academic officer. And you must have a diversity of people that maybe is not visible immediately, but they have different needs, different setups at home. Can you share how you provide an environment or a dynamic in which everyone feels included, and you kind of cultivate this inclusive sense of community in your staff or in your spheres of influence? Let's start with Katya or Elena.
I was just going to say, I'm always tempted to ask back to the person who asked me this kind of question, what do you mean by inclusion? Because of course,
go on.
I was going to say, because the opposite is someone feels excluded, and of course that's when you need to do something about it. So if we are talking about inclusion in the sense that there are different types of people who might not feel that they can flourish, or actually systematic exclusion, which is different, where the system is not allowing people to flourish. So there are two things: how you feel and what the system allows you to do or not. So from my point of view, I think suspending judgment is one of the first things that I think we all ought to do. Not assume that everyone feels excluded, first of all. And the other is not assuming that everyone feels included. And that the reason I say that was just to reflect on an experience I had many years ago when I was doing that Women in Engineering project. And my boss at the time said, Elena, we've done gender. What else should we do next? And I remember thinking, I came out when I was 36 years old, and I had been married, and like Katya, married, divorce. But on that first occasion, I had been married to a man, and I came out, and it was very dramatic, and it was one of those things that you have to overcome. So it occurred to me to say to this gentleman, why don't we do sexuality and sexual orientation? And he said, oh no, that we don't have a problem with that. Why don't we do mental health? And, you know, it was really fascinating because I just thought, what do you mean we don't have a problem with that? So that's why I said suspend judgment, because he assumed that because people didn't complain, which was his explanation, that there wasn't a problem. So I asked him, so how many people you know in this faculty of 6,000 people who are LGBTQ plus I, whatever. And he said, oh,
Yes.
you. And I said, well, you know, that can be right. It can be that it's only that I'm the gay in the village. That can be right. And so you have to suspend judgment to look at it. People might not be complaining, but that might be because, yes, they're too scared of saying something. But they might not be complaining because there is nothing to be worried about. So I think that two things are really important. And the final thing I will say is that systematic sort of I don't want to say discrimination, but systematic exclusion is often there because those systems were designed by one type of person. So my advice is get different types of people to design those systems, those solutions, those processes, and that will help with removing those types of exclusions.
Okay, so I think, well, you're an engineer. I always say you have to engineer those situations. You have to bring that people and be very intentional about how you hire and what kind of talent you're bringing and diversity. And I guess when I talk about diversity, I think about diversity of thought as well, and just people from different aspects. We can talk about socioeconomic background as well, which is huge in this country. And we can talk about gender or sexuality. Okay, thank you. Katya, how do you cultivate these environments and in your staff? Because running an organization as a CEO must be so challenging with so many people, so many different needs.
That's right. But listening to Elena, what strikes me is what a challenge, you know, when you have 6,000 people. Obviously, Mexgrocer is a lot smaller than that. And it's a lot easier, if you like, because I know every employee by name. I know their wife's or husband's name. I know their children's name. And one of the things that we've been doing, especially in the last 6-7 years before the pandemic, is to have in-house psychologists and psychiatrists. I think one of the issues that many employers, and I'm talking about medium-sized companies, you know, small companies can't afford it, and probably big companies already do, but medium-sized companies like mine very often don't see the benefit of that. And I'll give you the perfect example. If you have somebody in your organization that is having drug abuse, alcohol abuse, suicidal thoughts, even marital problems, you know, it's mental health it's a big broad, you know, of issues. That person's feelings affect his performance and affect his job. So I'm not going to talk about it from the human side of it, which is also important, obviously, but let's talk it from the purely business sense. It's not good for an organization to have people that have, you know, that are constantly worried about their marital status or suicidal thoughts, etc., etc. Now, if I give one of my drivers, for example, an increase in salary by £150 so he can go once a month and see a psychologist, he's not going to do it. He's not going to take that £150 because he needs to buy for his wife, for his children, for whatever. And he cannot go home and say, actually, I'm not feeling well. Can I use £150 to go and visit somebody so I can have a chat? Because there is still a huge stigma about spending the money on mental health. And since the pandemic, the NHS is just completely overwhelmed with, so to have an appointment is like 9 months. And to be honest, also, some of members of my staff have been with the NHS, and their experience was less than desirable. You know, I am a big fan of the NHS, but in these particular cases were pretty underperformed, let's say. So one of the things that we did is we have is a consultant outsourcing, but is there for anybody so they can go and get that help. And that is something that for me is very important, because if you treat people like you will be treating, you know, the people that you care about, your friends, your family, you know, people that you care about, they suddenly feel included, you know, they suddenly feel that they matter. And obviously this goes without saying, you have to pay people well. Nobody is happy on an empty stomach, you know, nobody. So pay them well, do incentives, have a clean environment where people feel that we have a policy every 3 months, we paint a different part of the company. So it always, you know, like the queen when she goes and visits places, there's always fresh paint, you know, in the warehouse, because it makes people feel that they are working in a clean environment. I am obsessed with cleanliness, because I also believe in business. If your place is a mess, if your desk is a mess, your head is also a mess, you know? You have to have a tidy ship is a happy ship, I always say. And it's important to work in a clean, well-organized, being paid fair. You don't have to, I mean, it's a business, not a charity, but you don't have to abuse people or underpay them. If the business is viable, it's gonna give it for that and more. So it's obvious that I'm making a business to make profit, but that doesn't mean to say that I have to exploit any of my employees. So I'm saying that to you, but our rotation in 2023 was 0. We have 0 rotation, precisely because I am a huge believer on continuity. I have people that have been working for me for 12 years, 13 years. I've seen the first baby, the second baby, in some cases the first and the second wife. Well, they've certainly seen 2 husbands of mine, 2 of the 4. But it's about caring for people, you know, and asking them, oh, is your son got the secondary school that he applied for? It's just about, you know, having a connection. And as I said, it's a lot easier for me. Now, another reason why a lot of the people that work for me, the other day we did a Mexgrocer International Day, and we had the flags of all the people that work for us, and we counted 14 flags, you know, of the national.
Wow.
Working in Mexgrocer, we have Venezuelans, we have Romanians, we have a Russian, we have Colombians. You know, we've got people from different places. And one of the things that many people said about Mexgrocer is because I'm Mexican, I'm an expat, and very often expats feel welcome in an environment where there is more expats as well, because it's suddenly we're not the only ones with a funny accent. So it's kind of like, and also something I discovered over the years, I only have 3 English people working in the company. I also find that the communication, especially when the English level is not very high, the communication is a lot easier when they both expats. So in our dispatch area at the moment, I've got somebody from Portugal, from Romania, and from Venezuela. And 3 of them speaks, I will say, medium to medium low English level. But because they all speak in a basic English, it's all fine. When the drivers arrive, and one of them is English and he speaks very fast, everybody gets lost. So it's quite interesting, and also it's quite yeah, I suppose anthropologically speaking, it's a phenomenon, I think, in how well expats get on with expats. In our Christmas parties, people love talking about how they celebrate Christmas in their country, or they very often go home and bring back things for people. You know, it's part of a culture, and it's part of family. But as I said, for us, it's a lot easier because we're small. I dread to think what it's like in a large organization. Gosh.
Monica, if I may, that this is really interesting, Katya, because I work for a study group now, which is a pathway provider for international students to engage in global education. And one thing that is really striking is the similarities. Diversity breeds diversity. And so this is an international education provider, and it attracts a lot of international educators, international people from different countries to work in the organization, as well as all the international students that we teach and help and so on and so forth. And I think you are absolutely right. When you have a diverse organization, whether it's an ethnicity or anything else, then it's much more comfortable to be part of it, being who you are. And earlier on, we were talking about being authentic, which I personally think is perhaps the single most important thing, at least for me anyway, to be able to do, well, to live and to do my job. And I think if you are able to be yourself wherever you go, then at the very least, you'll be happier. At the best, you'll actually be able to inspire others, because they'll be able to see some of the things that they might be scared of showing themselves.
I think, well, I agree. Representation, that's why representation is important. It's not only, I always say, you can attract the people, but the really challenging thing is to retain them in an organization. And you can only do that by having diversity in which people can feel comfortable and they're able to be themselves, which is what you said, the authenticity. We're running out of time, so I have one question, and I think the audience probably will be very interested. No, I know. We can have a part two. To know, I think they would really like your advice in, if I am in my early career or mid-career, and I'm a high flyer, I have big dreams, big goals, what would be one or two pieces of advice that you would give them? What should people be focusing on if they want to achieve their goals?
You want to go first, Katya, or you want me to go first?
You go first, Elena. The academic first.
Well, actually, it's not the academic who's going to talk. It's going to be the person, that the daughter of my parents, who's going to talk right now. Because I was just thinking earlier about what you were saying, Katya, about your grandmother who inspired you. I was more fortunate than you with my mom and dad, who didn't have good opportunities themselves. But I think their advice to me is the advice that I would give to others, because it is their advice. I mean, they grew up being told, my mom certainly, she grew up being told that amongst her siblings, she couldn't go to secondary school because she was a girl and the brother could earn money. So for her, that was devastating, and she didn't want that for me. And so I grew up all the time with 2 or 3 pieces of advice. You can do anything you want and dream. And I genuinely believe that anyone can achieve what they want to achieve, because my mom and dad were right. If you work hard, and we've said this before, work hard. They also told me, treat people well. And Katya was just giving real examples of how she treats well her staff, and the last one is never allow anyone to treat you badly. So those were the three things I grew up with: work hard, believe in yourself, treat people well, never allow anyone to treat you badly. And we said the other things just before, don't be afraid of making mistakes. Everyone does, just learn fast. And the final one for me, which I said earlier, is communicate. If you don't tell your story, no one will know that you exist.
Yeah,
thank you, Elena.
I totally agree with Elena, and it's very important for everybody. Very often people underestimate the impact that those cheerleaders can have in your life. You know, somebody, doesn't matter if it's your parents or somebody else, but it's quite important, especially as you're growing up. And adding to what Elena already says, I would say have a plan and making it quite methodical. So if you, for example, and I always say that when I'm doing mentoring, that's normally how I start. You start with your goal, your main goal. So let's say your main goal is going to the moon. Okay, that's the main goal. So where do you have to be in, and they call it SMART, you know, it has to be measurable, it has to be to a certain time. So it's important that you have objectives that are very clear. So if I say I want to go to the moon without a plan, it's a wish. It's not a real plan. It's just a wish. Now, if I said that I need to be working for NASA by 2035, and I need to be in this program by this, what do I need to achieve year by year? And then you create your objectives in a short, medium, and long term. And normally short are under a year, medium year to 2, and long after 2 years. And those objectives have to be realistic. They have to be achievable. They have to have a time at certain point, and you have to be able to measure. So if I said that I have to be qualified by 3 or accepted by 3 universities by the 27th of August 2025, that is a clear objective that is achievable, that is got a measure and it's got a timeline. Otherwise, it's just wishes. And very often people forget the importance, especially in entrepreneurial, because one of the problems with entrepreneur is nobody's there to tell you what to do. You know, you don't have a boss. And therefore, people sometimes wake up with no motivation or with no idea, or they start, oh, where do I start? And also, it's part of that. Have a good diary keeping, you know, so you have to be good at, and I say this very often to young entrepreneurs, if you have to do research or you got an idea or what, put it in your diary. And because if I said to my procurement manager, I need you to research 10 shops, vegan shops or vegan suppliers in Mexico by this time, she does it because she works for me. And I said, this is what you have to do. But when you are an entrepreneur and you think, I should really get 10 shops vegan because that would be a very good thing for my business. It would be a good thing. And then it goes and forgets, procrastinating, and then it never gets done. So being organized and having clear objectives of what you want to achieve, and being honest with yourself, whether it's really achievable. I mean, if right now I want to go to the moon, to be honest, my chances are very slim, you know, because I'm 50 years old. I
think you could go. I think you could go.
Maybe if I go with maybe I could, or with X, you know, with what's his name? Elon Musk. Maybe we didn't
Yeah.
that, but I think it's very important that people understand that yes, you can achieve everything you want, but as you said, it's the hard work, and I will add is that planning, that discipline. And as I said, especially when you are an entrepreneur, when you work for somebody, it's a lot easier to be organized because you wake up at a certain time, you go to your office, and you have a routine. Entrepreneurs, we don't have a time to wake up, time to go to sleep. It's pretty much all the times in your head. But if you're disorganized, if you don't have clear objectives, very often you can go, and this is what happened with a lot of business people. You know, they run from one idea to another, or they start a project and they abandon it, or they have ideas but they never make them done, or they try a little bit and they give up. So being organized is very important. And also something I listened recently into a podcast that I really like: never be afraid to ask for mentoring. It's you know, it's
That's
something.
Yeah.
I had wonderful mentors. One of them passed away last year, and I was devastated by it. But I had wonderful mentors over the years. And you know something, I was listening to somebody very high profile. I can't remember his name now, but very high profile Mexican, actually, talking in stock market and things like that. And he says that he went to Harvard, and he went to his favorite person in the stock market in New York, and just knock on his door and say, I wanted to be my mentor. And the guy was delighted and said, yeah, why not? So don't be afraid to approach any role model that you might have. I mean, within reason. Maybe Bill Gates is a little bit out of it.
It's not impossible. You never know.
Nothing is impossible.
You know what? Reach out, because there is a lot of people that have done their journey, and sometimes mentoring is like therapy. It's talking to somebody, bounce ideas, and I thoroughly enjoy mentoring. I thoroughly enjoy the times I've been mentored. I don't have a mentor at the moment, and I've been thinking about finding a new one, because the latest one died last year. But it's so refreshing, because and especially in business, it's a very lonely place, you know, because as you said, you have a lot of people, colleagues and everything. Of course, I got staff and people that are part of my team, but at the end of the day, the responsibility of where the company goes, and make a mistake, and over 30 families have nothing to eat the next month, or something, you know, crash and burns. It's ultimately is my responsibility. So it's a very lonely place, and having mentors, especially that are outside of the company, that have they got more objective vision. Do you know what I mean? So don't be afraid to reach. And I suppose in education, my best friend is a deputy head in a secondary school, and she had mentorings, and now she's mentoring. So I think never be afraid to reach out and ask for role models to guide you in your journey.
I completely agree. That point is one that I would amaze if I had not forgotten. But never ask for help and never say no to help. I think those two things are really important. Sometimes help comes to you and you go, no, thank you. No. Any help, bring it on.
I think we have come full circle, because at the beginning of our conversation, I think it was Katya who mentioned that she had a cheerleader. So it's interesting. We closed with mentors. We started with a cheerleader. So the commonality here is that we need other people. We need to tap into those relationships, that community, because Katya mentioned in this last part that you gotta face yourself and you have to be honest with yourself. But Katya, it doesn't come naturally to some of us. Sometimes we need feedback, and we need cheerleaders, and we need people who give us tough love, and that's where the mentorship comes in. So we have come full circle. Thank you so much for your time today. I could just go on for hours, but Perhaps part 2 is in the making now. Is there anything else you'd like to share before we close?
Just to thank you, Monica. I think in the UK, we have Mexican communities, but in reality, any community, to be honest, that you belong to, and there are many types of communities, whether it's the community where you come from, or communities where you feel happy or you do something. I think reaching out, being part of communities, not being isolated is so important. So not just to thank you for inviting me and allowing me to learn from Katya once again, and from you, of course. And hopefully, if people have any questions or they want to reach out, just put them in touch.
Thank you, Elena. Katya?
Same from me. Put them in touch. We are there, available to whoever needs, any kind of advice that we can possibly give. And just thank you. I mean, the only thing I'm wondering is, where is that glass of wine? Because I think
we're gonna do it. We're gonna definitely.
But it's been lovely.
Definitely, it's in the making.
In the make.
Thank you very much, Monica, for coming up. It's been an absolute pleasure.
Muchas gracias.
Thanks. Thanks to everyone who showed up today. I'm staying here a couple of minutes. If there is anything anybody would like to talk about, I'm just going to stop the recording now.